In the heart of a city, nestled amongst ordinary buildings, stood Chicken, a restaurant that would become the unlikely nexus of an apocalyptic battle. Inside, Lee Gun, the 13th Awakened, savored his drumsticks, oblivious to the grim prophecy delivered by Hugo Otis, the Sagittarius saint. "You're going to die tomorrow." Lee Gun, a rogue awakened, a legend whispered in hushed tones, scoffed. He, who had single-handedly overpowered the 12 saints, the chosen saviors of humanity, die? Impossible. His power, untainted by divine blessings, was a force of nature, a tempest that dwarfed even the gods. The world had changed on the final day of the 20th century. Disaster misfortunes, monstrous entities, had descended upon humanity, leaving chaos and fear in their wake. The 12 holy gods, offering a sliver of hope, bestowed their powers upon 12 chosen individuals, the saints. But then came Lee Gun, an anomaly, a 13th Awakened, who rose to power without divine intervention. His strength was unparalleled, his methods unorthodox, his appetite for fried chicken insatiable. Hugo, burdened with the weight of prophecy, tried to reason with Lee Gun, but the latter dismissed him with a wave of his hand, demanding 5 years' worth of free fried chicken as compensation for saving humanity. The saints who were given the responsibility for saving the humanity and was sent to same mission were talking about rewards after defeating the Red Eye, the greatest disaster for the world. Lee Gun stating that only the 10-year free pass of 7-star hotel will do, but saints unhappy by his demand and making fun of him by saying that he needs money to fix his face, doesn't he? Lee Gun, unfazed, thinks about saints being rascals in this dire situation too. Then saints added that they need to wait for some time and will show up after some casualties as it will increase the reward earned, laughing menacingly. Lee Gun signing as to never meet them again after this raid. As Lee Gun and the saints ventured into the ominous cave leading to the demon's tower, a sense of dread filled the air. They were about to face the Red Eye, the embodiment of humanity's doom. The monstrous head of Red Eye filled the cavern, its glowing red eyes burning into the very souls of those who dared to look. "Red Eye!" The shocked cry echoed, a testament to the sheer terror it inspired. Lee Gun, however, felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. To be able to exert this much pressure when we're only looking at him. He mused, his voice low and dangerous. The sheer power emanating from Red Eye was palpable. The ground started shaking as if there was something coming from there for the saints. The ground started to break, and from small cracks light started to emerge. Lee Gun blocking the light as a sign of danger, and the ground fully shattered, and a huge light emerged from below the saints' feet, which sent them flying in the air. The light pierced the tower and the air, leaving nothing behind. The smoke created from this huge attack settled. The other saints, their faces pale with fear, scrambled to retreat. "Run away!" they screamed, their voices filled with terror. How are we supposed to face something like that? Lee Gun, however, stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the monstrous entity. The fact that scum like them are saints. He muttered, a hint of disgust in his voice. He gripped the hilt of his sword, his knuckles white. "Well, I guess it doesn't matter. The one to defeat Red Eye is going to be the great me, anyway." With a resounding crash, Lee Gun launched himself towards Red Eye, his sword a blur of motion. The impact sent shockwaves through the cavern, the force of the blow shattering the very ground beneath them. Red Eye roared in fury, its monstrous form bathed in the hellish light. Lee Gun stood amidst the chaos, his eyes glowing with an eerie blue light, his face streaked with blood. "I wonder how long it's been. How's the outside world right now? Does time flow the same inside and outside the tower?" He didn't care. Time was a luxury he couldn't afford. "I'm too lazy to even think. Right now, I simply have to cut." He gripped his sword tighter, his knuckles white. Because this place is a special trap where disaster misfortunes are summoned endlessly. The cavern was a maelstrom of monstrous forms, a horde of creatures with glowing red eyes and gaping maws. Lee Gun stood amidst them, a lone figure against an endless tide. "Did you think this would stop me?" he snarled, his voice filled with defiance. "This is all it would take to kill me?" He scoffed, a dark chuckle escaping his lips. He would cut his way through this nightmare, one monstrous foe at a time. "Wait for me. I will survive," a voice echoed through the chaotic din, a desperate plea amidst the swirling darkness and ominous blue energy. The figure at the epicenter of the turmoil, Lee Gun, was a silhouette against the encroaching shadows, a lone beacon in a sea of despair. He was trapped, cornered, but not broken. "And I'm going to rip apart the people that did this to me," he growled, his voice laced with a chilling resolve. And so, time passed. And it's now 20 years later. 2 decades. 20 years of torment, of endless struggle. "And in a way," a voice cried out, a mix of fear and disbelief. Lee Gun's towering form loomed over a defeated creature, his presence a stark contrast to the pitiful remains at his feet. "How did you make it all the way here? You're the last one." The words were a testament to his indomitable will, his relentless pursuit. He had carved a path through this nightmare, a trail of carnage and defiance. Save me. Is anyone out there?" A desperate cry echoed, a plea lost in the suffocating darkness. "And no matter how much you shout, it won't do you any good," Lee Gun's voice boomed, a chilling pronouncement. The dark splatter against the red backdrop, a visceral testament to his power, was a stark reminder of the consequences of crossing him. "Phew!" he breathed, the tension finally easing. Finally! It's over. But even in victory, there was no peace. The chaotic scene, the remnants of a shattered reality, served as a constant reminder of the price he had paid. "I can finally go outside," he muttered, his voice filled with a longing that bordered on desperation. Now! The world outside was a wasteland, a shattered reflection of what once was. The word hung in the air, a stark declaration of the new reality. Voice echoed, a haunting melody in the desolate landscape. "Run faster! Oh!" The cries of the desperate, the panicked flight of the survivors, painted a grim picture of a world consumed by chaos. "Didn't I say we shouldn't go this way? Who would have thought this would happen? I was told that today would be safe." But there was no safety, no escape. The monstrous figures, the high-class disaster misfortunes, were a constant threat, a reminder of the darkness that had taken hold. "Ha ha ha! We're dead!" a voice cried out, a desperate laugh in the face of oblivion. The monstrous paw reached down, a symbol of the overwhelming power that threatened to consume them all. "Ah!" The screams echoed, the sounds of despair and destruction. KGH. A whimper, a final breath. Damn it! A curse against the cruel fate that had befallen them. If only Mr. Lee Gun had returned from the Demon's Tower, disaster misfortunes like these would have been. The towering structure loomed before them, a stark contrast against the desolate landscape. The glowing red door, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, beckoned them closer. A great light emerged from the tower, blinding the sky, and a sudden explosion sent some debris towards the both people, and made a huge crater. Both of them, shocked of what was even happening, stuck in debris from the huge explosion. "What? A person?" a voice echoed, a mixture of surprise and disbelief. A figure emerged from the portal, a man with a determined expression and a hint of weariness in his eyes. "Jay Jimin!" a voice called out, a wave of relief washing over the two men. "A person's coming out from the collapsed tower!" the other man exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder. The figure approached them, his steps slow and deliberate, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape. Image of Lee Gun standing amidst rubble with a furious expression and the text, "How dare they stab me in the back and throw me into a trap?" And then more than angry Lee Gun with glowing green eyes and a menacing grin, reaching out with his hand, said, "You're all dead," to all the saints who betray him and left him alone. The dust settled, revealing a scene of utter devastation. Jagged rocks jutted from the shattered earth, a testament to the raw power unleashed. "What is this?" one of the men exclaimed, his voice trembling. What is that?" his companion echoed, eyes wide with fear. Emerging from the smoke was a monstrous figure, its eyes glowing red, a snarling visage of pure menace. A massive foot slammed into the ground, sending tremors through the rubble. "I can't believe it!" one of the men whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. He dealt with an orange-class disaster misfortune that even high-class awakeners find hard to kill. Li Gun stood amidst the carnage, the monstrous wolf-like creature at his feet, lifeless. As if it were just a bug. He muttered, his expression a mix of weariness and disdain. He looked up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. Through a gap in the rocks, a strange pointed structure loomed in the distance. Suddenly, a blinding beam of light erupted from the ground, sending the rocks and the two men flying. Wait! Why are you attacking us all of a sudden? One of them cried out. Hiek! His companion whimpered. Li Gun stared at them, a dawning realization spreading across his face. What? They were humans. He paused, a thoughtful expression replacing his confusion. Then is it basically done? Phew, we lived. He looked down at the two men, his expression shifting to something akin to annoyance. Ha! Then, a monstrous roar echoed through the air, and the wolf-like creature's leader appeared, its red eyes burning with rage. There's no way. The wolf leader came too. Hey, man! Quickly run away! One of the men shouted, his voice filled with terror. The monstrous wolf-like creature unleashed a torrent of red energy, a devastating attack that sent the two men reeling. Keuuu! They cried out in pain. A massive explosion erupted, the force of it shaking the very ground beneath them. Are we alive? One of the men asked, his voice barely a whisper. Eyes widened in shock. He turned away from the destruction, his back to the two men, a determined expression on his face. He exclaimed, his voice filled with a newfound resolve. By any chance, did he protect us? One of the men asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Li Gun's expression shifted to a menacing grin. You mutt! He growled, his voice laced with venom. The monstrous wolf-like creature lunged, but Li Gun was too fast. If you're a mutt, then just... He snarled, his fist connecting with the creature's jaw, sending it flying. The impact was devastating, the force of it shattering the ground beneath them. The two men watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide with terror. Li Gun landed a final crushing blow, the force of it killing the monstrous creature instantly. It must be really over this time, right? Li Gun asked, his voice filled with a weary hope. He paused, his eyes narrowing. Now that I look properly. He turned to the two men, his expression hardening. You too? Yes. They replied in unison, their voices trembling. Li Gun's eyes glowed green, a terrifying intensity in their depths. F. He growled, his voice a low rumble. FF what? One of the men stammered, his eyes wide with fear. Li Gun's expression softened, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Buy me some food. And some clothes too, Li Gun added, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. The two men behind him exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. They were standing in a crater, the remnants of a once bustling street reduced to rubble. They found themselves in front of a brightly lit storefront, a sign proclaiming Kimbap World in bold letters. His eyes fixed on the steaming bowls of noodles being served inside. Keu! He exclaimed, his voice filled with childlike excitement. The two men watched in disbelief as he polished off a mountain of noodles, his stomach expanding to an alarming size. Is this for real? He ate 120 servings alone. I only ate a little, he mumbled, his mouth full of noodles. How is this a little? They exclaimed in unison. He pointed at the menu. Another serving of noodles for dessert, please. The two men groaned. But who are you, Hyung? One of the men finally asked, his curiosity outweighing his fear. A Templar? Bishop. Why were you near the tower? Li Gun paused, a toothpick dangling from his lips. I was inside the tower, and when I came out, I was there. What? From inside the tower? The man exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Li Gun shrugged. Rather, there's something I'm curious about as well. The other man leaned forward, his expression serious. Who are you? You look like a normal civilian. Why can I sense magic power from you? Before Li Gun could answer, the first man spoke up. That's because this boy here is a Templar. Aren't you also a Templar who awakened through the blessing of a holy god? Li Gun's eyes narrowed. Holy god, my ass. Why would I serve some rascals like Dash? He stopped mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on the spoon in his hand. A distorted reflection of his face stared back at him. He muttered, his voice barely a whisper. Suddenly, his expression twisted into a mask of horror. Mirror! Where's the mirror? He screamed, his voice filled with panic. He lunged towards the counter, his hands outstretched. Over there! One of the men stammered, pointing towards a small mirror hanging on the wall. Li Gun snatched the mirror, his eyes scanning his reflection. What? He breathed, his voice filled with disbelief. His body was completely healed. The scars and wounds from his previous battles vanished without a trace. They were wounds from the skills risks and were difficult to heal. He mumbled, his fingers tracing the smooth skin of his face. He looked at his left arm, a strange pattern glowing faintly beneath his skin. Now that I think about it, I'm sure my left arm also. Suddenly, the pattern on his arm erupted into a glowing snake-like form, writhing and twisting in the air. Q! Li Gun cried out, his body convulsing. A message flashed across his vision. You have experienced death. You have obtained an impossible achievement. Your existing stats are being inherited by your new body. All achievements from the tower are being converted into EXP. You have formed the divine skill. All unique skills and traits that were previously possessed have been inherited and converted. You are now able to use the strength of Ophiuchus. Energy crackled around Li Gun, a glowing snake symbol hovering above him. He stared at the monstrous serpent before him, its red eyes burning with malevolent intent. A wave of power washed over him, the strength of Ophiuchus surging through his veins. The serpent gazed at him with its gigantic body. Li Gun startled as he was in shock of seeing such a massive spirit was living inside of him. He met the creature's gaze, his own eyes blazing with newfound power. With the eyes meeting of both at each other, Li Gun forwarded his hand to make a contract with him. A bright light emerged from the touch of both, as if they have accepted each other. Finally, Li Gun came out of the spirit world, confused what happened to him. Hyung, are you all right? One of the men asked, his voice laced with concern. Li Gun, shirtless and disoriented, simply replied, did you see a snake by any chance? The men exchanged confused glances. We didn't see a snake. You just took off all your clothes and ran to the mirror, screaming and gripping your wrist. Li Gun examined his hand, a strange symbol glowing faintly. Can other people not see this? He wondered. A message flashed before his eyes. You have become the owner of the constellation Ophiuchus. His body had undergone a strange transformation, super regeneration, healing him, but at a cost, a temporary 50% reduction in physical strength. Is the change to my body because of this skill? He mused, noting the absence of the holy god's energy. Whatever has happened, there's nothing bad to come of this since my body has recovered. But Li Gun's thoughts quickly turned to vengeance. What I need to do now is to find and kill the saints who ran away and the witch who stabbed me in the back. He clenched his fist, a dark energy radiating from him. Meanwhile, the collapse of the demon's tower sent shockwaves through the world. It's real. The demon's tower has collapsed, a reporter announced. Yellow police tape cordoning off the devastated site. The whole world will get noisy soon. Speculation ran rampant. Could this be the work of Li Gun's followers, or the saints who hated him? Both reporters making their speculations as to what could have happened. Other replied in disbelief of what others said while pointing towards the huge disaster misfortune which even high-class saints have trouble hunting. Other reporters shocked to realize and pointed to Li Gun return. Other reporter settles the talk by saying that they can't be sure of this and have to wait to find out. Now where the press conference was held got a group of reporters wanting to know about the tower collapse from Mr. Yang Wei himself while at a press conference, Yang Wei, an Aries constellation saint, remained tight-lipped. I won't comment on that question. His refusal only fueled the frenzy. Backstage, he fumed. His fist slammed into a surface. Lee Gun. Just how many times is it already today? The question hung in the air. Lee Gun was alive? The image of the ruined tower loomed, a stark reminder of the impossible. No! It's impossible, Yang Wei muttered. Thousands of demonic beasts, all black class. He recalled their escape. It's a miracle we were able to come out without him knowing we stole the Red Eye's throat. His body was already damaged. It wasn't like he received protection like us 12 saints. Yang Wei's thoughts were interrupted by a feeling of dread. But if he were to really come back alive, then... Lee Gun, phone in hand, grinned menacingly. As expected, I should start off by stepping on this rascal first, right? The world was about to learn that Lee Gun's return was not a miracle, but a reckoning. The roar of the 747 echoed across the tarmac, a stark contrast to the hushed reverence that greeted Hugo Otis's descent. Welcome, the word boomed, yet it felt more like a command. To think, meeting one of the 12 saints, an honor indeed. But beneath the polite bows and murmured praises, a tension crackled, unseen yet palpable. Mr. Hugo Otis, they proclaimed, a title laden with power. He, the Sagittarius constellation saint, a chosen person, they whispered, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. Hugo, however, felt a gnawing unease. The Prime Minister's summons, the hushed questions about Lee Gun, Hugo Otis went to his car to meet Mr. President. As the car headed towards the destination, he lost in his thoughts, suddenly phone rings grabbing his attention. Thinking that the call might be from reporters asking about Lee Gun reappearance, not ready to believe that it was all true. The sudden, restricted call. It all painted a troubling picture. You're going to die tomorrow, a voice had warned, cold and detached. Then, the unsettling grin of the man with the fried chicken, and the chaotic scene of the Devil's Tower attack. Hugo Otis thinking about the scene of what happened after Lee went to the tower with Saints when he was completing his request for defeating the monsters on his behalf, while thinking that his premonition would become wrong and Lee Gun returned safe. What happened to Gun? They'd asked, their voices laced with dread. The Saints, heroes now, discarding him, returning with the Red Eye's head. A crown, a symbol of their newfound power, juxtaposed against the image of a wounded man, desperately searching. That's too much, Hugo Otis, Jean-Louis Morang had sneered, a dark smile twisting his lips. It's nonsense to even think that Lee Gun could make it out alive. But Hugo couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The Prime Minister's call, the news of the Devil's Tower's collapse, the insistence that Gun was dead, it didn't add up. Gun died in the Devil's Tower that day, he stated, trying to convince himself as much as the Prime Minister. But the words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to deny the growing unease. If the news the South Korean government just received is true, the Prime Minister had said, his voice grave, that line was called. Hugo's blood ran cold. What? He demanded, the word barely a whisper. What was called? The answer, he knew, would shatter the fragile peace they clung to, and plunge them into a darkness they thought they'd escaped. Stop the car, he yelled, a wave of panic washing over him. The driver, startled, slammed on the brakes. Is that true? Hugo muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Hugo, reeling, thought back to the call. Then perhaps. The call that came a while ago. He murmured, a chilling realization dawning on him. He grabbed his phone, the screen displaying 30 missed calls, and a voice message has arrived. He tapped the screen, the message playing. Hey, oh Teksu. The voice began, familiar and terrifying. The voice continued, I will find you, and I will kill you. Good luck. Hugo's eyes widened. Is it really you, Gun? He gasped, his mind racing. He knew he had to act. Turn the car around right now. We're going back to the airport, he shouted, urgency in his voice. A storefront with the sign, Gimbap World, greeted him. Then, a figure emerged, holding a smartphone, a strange grin on his face. Oh Teksu, you grew up so much. Even ignoring my calls, he said, his tone playful yet menacing. Hugo watched, confused, as the man marveled at the smartphone. seemingly unaware of its basic functions. "I went into the tower in 2005, he said, his eyes wide with wonder. "So is IT 2025 now?" He asked about the news, about Lee Gun. "Then can I also look at news reports related to Lee Gun?" he asked, his interest piqued. The smartphone screen displayed a series of critical comments about Lee Gun, fueling the man's anger. "Who caught the red eye? These he roared, his eyes blazing. He seemed fixated on the news, on the will Lee Gun had left behind. "A will?" he questioned, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. The will, displayed on the smartphone screen, revealed that Lee Gun had left everything to the other saints, excluding Hugo's constellation. The 12 saints who returned from the Devil's Tower are grieving Lee Gun's death and are commemorating his sacrifice. The article read. The man's anger intensified. "Decision. They're all bugs," he screamed, his eyes glowing. The smartphone image shifted, displaying a distorted image of itself with a halo and a person looking distressed. The man seemed to be losing control. "But what do I do?" he muttered, his expression troubled. He looked different, his face scarred, his eye glowing. "Until I can torture each and every saint, I should stay quiet for the time being," he thought, his expression grim. Then, a strange energy pulsed through him, a realization dawning on him. "This energy is..." he murmured, his eyes widening. He turned to leave, a determined look on his face. Hyung, where are you going?" someone asked. "To get some air," he replied, walking away from a scene of fiery destruction. He encountered strange, fiery creatures. "Avatars?" he questioned. The creatures seemed to be creating a barrier, demanding tribute, his anger rising. "I should just..." he thought, his hands clenching. He heard whispers, stories about Lee Gun, the news overwhelming him. "That's what I'm saying, it's plastered everywhere because of the news," someone exclaimed. Hugo overheard a conversation about Lee Gun, the people dismissing him. Then, he saw them, people with a gold pin or emblem. "Those people are," he exclaimed, his voice filled with dread. "They're from the Gemini's sect?" The air crackled with tension. The mustached man questioned, his eyes narrowing at the spiky-haired figure. "Hyung, come back here, quick," the younger man urged, sensing the danger. But the spiky-haired man was unfazed, a dangerous calm settling over him. "What are you looking at?" the mustached man growled, his cigarette dangling from his lips. "Piss off." A cartoonish figure in the background wailed, "We're screwed." But the mustached man remained defiant. "Why? You got an issue," he challenged, his face inches from the other man's. "If you have an issue, hit me." The woman tried to intervene, her hand on the mustached man's shoulder. "Oppa. Let's just go, he's going to end up pissing his pants." But the insult only fueled the spiky-haired man's anger. He spat. As the couple walked away, they dismissed him. "It's always those idiots that like Lee Gun," the woman sneered. "Agreed," the mustached man replied. The spiky-haired man's anger flared. "Hey, you two cockroaches," he roared. "Cockroaches?" the couple questioned, their eyes widening. "Yes, you two. Cockroaches," he confirmed, his grin menacing. The air crackled with tension as Han Jimin, his face inches from the other man's, growled. "Try saying that again." The man, broad and shaved-headed, flinched, but stood his ground. The Korean syllables echoed, a sound of imminent violence. It was a confrontation born of some unseen slight. A shockwave ripped through the street, throwing Han Jimin and his adversary backwards. A woman's scream, "Kaya!" pierced the air, followed by the sound of devastating impact. When the dust settled, a figure lay crumpled amidst the debris. Han Jimin, his face contorted in shock. Lee Gun with only a flick of his finger sent the other person flying. The girl in utterly disbelief lunged to attack from behind. To her shock, Lee Gun already noticed her and said with a grin on his face, "You thought I would not notice you from behind." Another flick of the finger sent the woman flying into the building, destroying the wall. Lee Gun, getting relaxed after venting out his anger, said, "Frikin' nobodies, as he stood with his hand in his pocket. The dark-haired man, his companion, recoiled. Hey, you might be frustrated, but you can't use your abilities in the middle of the street. Han Jimin scoffed. If I had used my ability, those guys would have died. The dark-haired man's eyes widened. He reduced an A-class Templar to that with his bare hands? He whispered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. Han Jimin, oblivious to the growing unease, held up a necklace he had retrieved from the fallen man. Ain't this a relic? He asked, his eyes glinting with newfound interest. But why do these guys have a relic? Only saints should have them. The dark-haired man's expression turned grim. Hyung, you really don't know anything, he asked, his voice laced with exasperation. He proceeded to explain the history of their world, a world where humanity had been brought to the brink of extinction by a cataclysmic event. Only the intervention of the holy gods and their chosen 12 saints had saved them. The saints, unable to protect the entire world alone, had gathered followers, forming powerful sections. The Templars, those who received power from the saints, were divided into ranks according to their strength. The Gemini Templars, the sect these men belonged to, were known for their immense wealth and influence, drawing in powerful tycoons. Han Jimin listened, his eyes widening as the implications sank in. That much happened in 20 years. He muttered, his fist clenching. The dark-haired man, sensing the shift in his companion's mood, pointed towards the sky. Look over there. 3 colossal creatures, formed of living flames, materialized above them. Their presence radiated power, a power that made the dark-haired man tremble. They're like the reflections of the holy gods, he exclaimed, his voice filled with dread. Confronting them is the same as confronting a holy god. The fiery creatures spoke, their voices echoing in Han Jimin's mind. They were the avatars of wealth and greed, affiliated with the White Ram constellation. They offered him riches beyond imagination if he would kill the woman and the man. Han Jimin, his eyes fixed on the creatures, grinned. I was wondering why the Ares rascals were here. He muttered, his voice laced with dark amusement. Turns out, they were trying to fill their bellies like that fat pig. With a surge of power, Han Jimin unleashed his full strength. The ground trembled, and a shockwave ripped through the air. The fiery creatures roared in pain, their forms flickering and distorting. The dark-haired man, shielding himself from the blast, cried out, "NGHH!" When the dust settled, the city skyline was visible in the distance, a stark contrast to the swirling energy that had consumed the immediate surroundings. The dark-haired man stared at the scene, his eyes wide with disbelief. That guy is definitely no ordinary person, he muttered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. Han Jimin, his grin widening, turned to the dark-haired man. Han Jimin, he called out, his voice laced with a hint of menace. The dark-haired man flinched. Why yes, he stammered. Han Jimin gestured towards the fallen man. About these thugs here, he said, his eyes glinting. You said they're Gemini Templars? The dark-haired man nodded, his eyes fixed on the spiky-haired man. Yes, it's the sect with the greatest power in our country, an elite collective of up to 2/3 of tycoons of the business world. Han Jimin's grin widened. Then they must have some moolah, he asked, his voice laced with avarice. He glanced at the fallen man's clothes. All the clothes this guy's wearing are branded clothes, yeah? The dark-haired man stared at him, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and resignation. Han Jimin, oblivious to his companion's unease, began to hum a cheerful tune. La la la, time for some exciting looting, he declared, his eyes glinting with anticipation. The dark-haired man could only watch in dismay as Han Jimin, the man who had just defeated beings akin to gods, prepared to rummage through the pockets of a fallen gangster. We've finally arrived, Jimin announced, his voice echoing in the twilight as they stood before a nondescript apartment building. I live over there, he pointed to a dimly lit window on the second floor, in the apartment with the lights off. And I'm his next-door neighbor. Thank you for saving our lives today and even dropping us off at our houses. The young man bowed, his gratitude sincere. Jimin simply smiled, a faint, almost unsettling smile. Then, a moment of odd silence, Jimin peered into the apartment's dark window, a question mark hovering in his eyes. "We're not going in." "I'm sleepy," Jimin yawned, stretching his arms. "You were intending on crashing at our places?" Sung-jae exclaimed, his voice laced with disbelief. The next moment, Jimin was inside, a blur of motion. "HM?" he asked, turning to reveal a newly trimmed haircut and a hint of a smirk. "Amazing! Hyung, you cut your hair!" the young man exclaimed, giving him a thumbs up. "You've become really cool." Sung-jae added, a hint of reluctant admiration in his voice. Jimin's smile widened. In the past, hair loss was a side effect of using my ability, so each and every strand of hair was precious. He mused, a hint of melancholy in his voice. Suddenly, a buzzing sound filled the room. "Oi, what's this now?" Jimin asked, spotting a large, mosquito-like creature with glowing eyes. "What's a disaster misfortune doing in the house?" With a swift, powerful punch, Jimin dispatched the creature. "Wah! You caught that with one hand. Even the experts can't catch them like that." Sung-jae stammered, his eyes wide. "There's quite a few. Why do they keep coming for me, seriously?" Jimin grumbled, swatting at the air. "Could it be you give off a sweet scent that disaster misfortunes like?" the young man suggested. "Scent my foot. This sort of thing usually happens because there's something inside the house," Jimin retorted, his eyes narrowing. He then found a mask, a music box, and a clock. "Of course disaster misfortunes would show up when you've got these kinds of monstrosities inside your house. I got these things from the Gemini saint himself. They're not mine, but the saint himself kissed them to bless dash," Jimin began, holding out the objects. "Kaya-wa!" Sung-jae recoiled, his face contorted in disgust. "Hey you, listen up. This mask is a relic that spies on the buyer, and this music box is a relic that collects personal information. This clock is even a relic that attracts disaster misfortunes," Jimin explained, his voice laced with venom. "Those saints. It wasn't enough that they made off with all my money. They've been selling frickin' monstrosities to rip off the people, huh? Just thinking about them's pissing me off. Throw them all away!" Jimin roared, his voice echoing through the apartment. "You-wa-af!" The room erupted in chaos, a cacophony of crashes and beeps. When the dust settled, Jimin stood before a door, his expression unreadable. "Who the hell are you?" Sung-jae demanded, his voice trembling. The young man stammered. "Me," Jimin asked, his eyes darkening. "The owner of this house." The room was a mess, a testament to Jimin's rage. Outside, at the Grand White Aries sect, a man named Yang Wei received disturbing news. "The avatars in Korea disappeared," he exclaimed. "Yes, so the Korean branch has been panicking." "Just who did such a thing?" Yang Wei growled, his eyes blazing. "An avatar is a direct subordinate of a holy god. Only a very strong awakener would be able to repel them. Contact the other saints. Ask if they have anything to do with this," Yang Wei ordered. "Understood. But we are still unable to reach Sagittarius." "Hugo, no need to pay any heed. I'm sure he's just gone to the UK to play mercenary," another man scoffed. "About that, as soon as Hugo Nim arrived in the UK, we were told that he left again, right away." "Really? Where to?" "His destination was Korea." The Grand Hall of the White Aries sect buzzed with unease. Yang Wei, the sect's leader, stood amidst the ornate splendor, his brow furrowed in thought. The disappearance of the avatars in Korea, the sudden departure of Hugo, Lee Gun's old friend, it all pointed to one terrifying possibility. Lee Gun's rumored survival. Hugo, he was a close friend of Lee Gun, a voice echoed through the hall, confirming Yang Wei's suspicions. The specter of Lee Gun, a legend whispered in hushed tones, loomed large. Could his return be the catalyst for the current chaos? Yang Wei's fist clenched, the ornate object in his grasp creaking under the pressure. "Damn it!" he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Make a more detailed report. Damn it. What else? He demanded, his voice echoing through the hall. The report painted a bizarre picture. A Gemini Templar found unconscious, stripped down to his underwear, a victim of an encounter with a handsome man. The description raised more questions than it answered. A handsome man? Yang Wei questioned, skepticism evident in his tone. Then is it not Li Gun? The rumors of Li Gun's return, coupled with the strange attack, created a chilling atmosphere. In any case, the situation these days hasn't been good, Yang Wei admitted, his voice heavy with concern. It's possible that Li Gun is alive and has returned. The disappearance of the avatars, the failure against the Spider Queen, it all added to the growing sense of dread. Prepare my private plane, Yang Wei commanded, his voice resolute. Do you plan on personally going there? An aide asked, shocked. Yes, Yang Wei confirmed. I must go check with my own two eyes. Just what in the world is going on in Korea? Meanwhile, in a Gemini-affiliated hospital in Korea, a man lay unconscious, his breathing labored. Just who? A voice rasped, the words barely audible. An older man, his face etched with worry, leaned over the unconscious figure. Just who the hell turned my grandchild into this? He roared, his voice filled with rage. Oh, you, he shouted, pointing at a figure in the background. Please do not worry about this, the figure replied, his voice calm and reassuring. This is why the Gemini sect dispatched me. President, he stated, revealing his identity as Min Sung-hoon, Gemini Templar S-Class, the Freeze. The narrative begins with a close-up of a young man with spiky reddish-brown hair, a concerned expression etched on his face. Then he says as little bit pissed off, so, you met at the Demon's Tower today? Then the same young man engaged in a conversation with his brother. His brother confirms the encounter. And he dealt with all the disaster misfortunes alone. Bare-handed at that. The first young man exclaims. Yeah. The second replies. The scene shifts to a more intense exchange, with the first young man questioning, and he made A-class Templars faint too. And the second confirming with a resounding, yeah, that's right. The tension escalates as the first young man demands, does that make sense? And reveals that the individual in question destroyed all the relics in the house. The second youth, seemingly unconcerned, casually states, these are all fakes. The conversation takes a more personal turn. What sect are you a part of? The first young man demands. The dark-haired youth responds with a nonchalant, do I need one? And a subtle smile, revealing a rebellious attitude. The first young man presses further, inquiring about the individual's beliefs and affiliations. The dark-haired youth's evasive answers and dismissive demeanor further fuel the tension. The scene shifts to a close-up of the dark-haired youth. He asked further, so what's your name? As in reply he said, Li Gun. Sung Jae getting angry from his answers while his brother trying to calm him down. But to no avail, his anger erupted as a stranger for him came into his house without any permission and even destroyed relics, and to add to that also using name of Li Gun. Now as he can't contain his anger, an avatar emerged from behind him as he is unleashing his full power. This made his brother concerned for their house. For Li Gun, a message screen popped up warning him, magic power is bursting house. To which Li Gun also used his eye skill, which let him know about Sung Jae everything about his power. After seeing his power, he admired him of genius, as he can already summon high-class avatars. Sung Jae making ready his ultimate move, which further concerned his brother about Li Gun, and telling him to run away as his brother is a A-class Templar, and more importantly, he is intense Li Gun fanatic. His brother, taking the lead in the situation, threatens Li Gun to get out of his house, if he don't want to get screwed. Now Li Gun with his super fast speed came behind his back and told him, he's gonna pee if he plays with fire too much. As in shock, his brother can't react to his speed, did not even notice him behind him, sent him flying with only his finger flick. Making a comment that he was gonna burn not only the house but whole building. His brother now concerned for his brother life, while Li Gun tells him smiling menacingly, yes, he is good. His brother looked at his brother and questioned what Li Gun said. Fine. Seeing a huge bump in his head and foam coming out of his mouth. As his brother trying to wake him up, Li Gun told them that he is going to bed. But to his shock, when he opened the room, he only saw his figurines all over the place. Lee Gun face turning dark of anger and disgust, asking them, "What is this?" As to reply, one said, he told that his bro is Lee Gun fanatic, while others stated to not touch them as it's more valuable than his own life. Lee Gun, not listening to anything, removed the head of all the figurines, which made Sung Jae cry. Him trying to stop him by words, as his power is nothing compared to his, does not stop Lee Gun at all. This made Sung Jae cry so hard as he had lost his brother life. The scene shifts to a news report, announcing the attack on 2 Gemini Templars by a suspicious unknown man. This news report connects the events unfolding in the house to a larger, more sinister plot. A man with light-colored hair, presumably of European descent, watches the news report with a look of grave concern. "This is definitely Gun's doing," he exclaims, his voice laced with frustration and a hint of fear. He appears to be a man of power and influence, deeply invested in the situation. A woman in an apron approaches him, asking what he would like to order. He remains silent, lost in his own thoughts. The woman, with a sudden shift in demeanor, reveals glowing red eyes. "Stop trying stupid things and heck off, Yang Wei," voice laced with a chilling menace. The man, taken aback, responds with a startled, "Ah, damn." The woman's transformation suggests a hidden agenda, adding another layer of complexity to the unfolding events. A large, imposing figure with glowing red eyes appears, looming over the woman. "It's been a while, Hugo," he says, his voice deep and resonant. The woman, seemingly unfazed, replies with a mischievous smile, "I couldn't reach you, you know." The exchange hints at a long-standing relationship, possibly one marked by both rivalry and mutual understanding. The man with light-colored hair, now identified as Hugo, reacts with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "It seems like you've gotten a taste of Lee Gun," the woman observes, her voice laced with a hint of amusement. "It'll be better for you to tell me what you know about him," Hugo demands, his tone hardening. The woman's smile widens, revealing a mischievous glint in her eyes. The tension reaches a boiling point. "This is why I hate you," Hugo declares, his voice filled with rage. "You rascal, perverted psycho who possesses other people's bodies." The woman's expression shifts, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She exclaims, her composure momentarily shaken. The scene shifts back and forth, showing the woman's confusion and Hugo's growing anger. "Ha! What was I doing?" she asks, her voice laced with uncertainty. Hugo's anger continues to escalate. "Yang Wei! Playing pathetic jokes like that," he shouts, his frustration evident. "I need to find Gun first before the others do," he declares, his resolve hardening. The narrative concludes with a stylized text box. "Just where are you, Gun?" A wide shot of a large, modern building, identified as Gyeonggi-do, Buchin, a huge mart, suggests a shift in location, potentially a place of refuge or a new battleground. Within the mart, Jimin and Sung Jae engage in a heated debate. Jimin, seemingly more open to the possibility, suggests, "Sung Jae, maybe that Hyung really is Lee Gun-nim?" Sung Jae, his face a mask of disbelief, vehemently rejects the idea. "Are you joking? He looks different," he retorts, clinging to his idealized image of the hero. Sungji's denial escalates into a passionate defense of the real Lee Gun. "And Lee Gun-nim is a hero who saved humanity," he declares, his voice filled with reverence. "Do you think he's the same as that thug?" His fervent admiration for the hero clashes with the unsettling reality of the dark-haired youth's actions. Jimin, however, remains unconvinced. "But I'm sure I saw him come out of the demon's tower," he insists, his tone thoughtful. "And his strength isn't ordinary. If he really is." Sung Jae, however, cuts him off with a resolute "no," his voice echoing slightly in the otherwise quiet space. "I'm sure of it," he declared, his gaze fixed on Jimin. "It's what father told me." Jimin, a look of thoughtful consideration on his face, nodded slowly. "Ah, that's right. Your father is the Sagittarius's." His voice trailed off, the sentence left unfinished. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the tranquility. "Kya, it's a thief!" The scream was followed by a chaotic flurry of motion. Jimin and Sung Jae were thrown backwards, their shopping cart tumbling over, groceries scattering across the polished floor. Sung Jae cried out in alarm as they landed with a thud. A figure lunged from the shadows, a dark-clad assailant with a masked face and razor-sharp nails extended. The assailant moved with a speed that defied belief, their movements a blur of motion. Jimin, clutching his head, gasped. "Ku, that speed. Is he one of Scorpio's Templars?" Sung Jae, his eyes blazing with anger, shouted. "He is stealing using his power." The mart descended into chaos. Items vanished in a blur of motion, leaving behind a trail of bewildered shoppers. All the belongings and wallets in the mart will be stolen if we leave him be. The masked figure, their voice distorted, let out a chilling laugh. "Stupid rascals," they hissed, their eyes glowing an eerie red through the mask. "You won't be able to stop my speed even if you're a Templar." They moved with impossible swiftness, a whirlwind of dark clothing and malicious intent. "I've got most of the things, so I should go somewhere else and dash." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chaos. "Gotcha!" The masked figure was thrown back, their movements halted. "Geeu. There's no way!" They groaned, their eyes wide with shock. A tall, dark-haired man stood behind them, his expression calm and collected. "Hyung! Why'd you come here?" the masked figure asked, their voice laced with confusion. I came because I forgot to tell you to buy chicken," the dark-haired man replied casually, his tone unfazed by the chaos unfolding around them. "You're quite good," the dark-haired man remarked, his gaze fixed on the defeated figure. "It would have been hard to catch one of Scorpio's Templars because they're very agile." He turned to the others, his expression serious. "It seems like you're an ordinary believer judging by your energy, so please report to the police first next time." "Who's this man?" the dark-haired man thought in his mind, his thought laced with a hint of amusement, addressing a bald man who had arrived on the scene. The mart was now a scene of pandemonium, figures flying through the air, debris raining down like a strange metallic snow. The masked figure, still reeling from their defeat, looked around in confusion. "What, is it an earthquake?" they muttered. "That's good. I should leave when I have the chance." They scrambled to their feet, only to be met with a blast of energy. A powerful force sent them flying backwards, landing with a heavy thud. The masked figure, now on the ground, looked up in terror. "Disaster misfortune?" they cried out, their voice filled with fear. "Why is a disaster misfortune in Abe Green Zone?" They scrambled to their feet again, their eyes frantically scanning the scene. "I should run away before I get involved," they muttered, their voice trembling. They made a break for it, but the chaos was too much. "Even if it's a pretty strong disaster misfortune, it won't be able to catch up to my speed," they declared. A monstrous entity, a shadowy tree-like creature with jagged limbs, emerged from the shadows. The masked figure's heart pounded in their chest. The air shimmered with red, viscous droplets. The monstrous entity, its form a grotesque amalgamation of chitin and muscle, towered over the remaining crowd. Its eyes, glowing with malevolent intent, scanned the scene, its presence a suffocating wave of dread. The crowd, their faces etched with terror. A warning blared through the mart speakers, its tone urgent and dire. "Warning, warning, this is a real situation. Disaster misfortune occurrence within the mart at the current time. Civilians inside the mart, please evacuate outside the mart as soon as possible." The crowd, their faces pale and drawn, exchanged terrified glances. The monstrous entity, now identified as the Spider Queen, emerged from the shadows, its segmented, insect-like body and sharp, chitinous appendages a terrifying sight. The mart, once a bustling hub of commerce, was now classified as a red zone, a place of extreme danger. The Spider Queen, its form a grotesque parody of life, unleashed its power. The air shimmered with unseen energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and distort. The crowd, their faces etched with terror, shrank back from the monstrous entity, their cries lost in the cacophony of destruction. A young man, his eyes wide with terror, looked up at the monstrous entity's gaping maw, his voice caught in his throat. A figure, their form a blur of motion, clashed with the monstrous entity. The air shimmered with unseen energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and distort. The figure, their movements fluid and graceful, moved with an almost supernatural speed. A voice calm and collected echoed through the chaos. "Hey kid, you need to be careful of where you're going," the young man, his face streaked with dirt and grime, looked up in confusion. Another figure, their eyes glowing with an eerie green light, crouched before him, their expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" they asked, their voice laced with a strange, unsettling calm. Watched as the young man struggled to his feet. "Well, it's good that he seems fine," they remarked, their voice laced with a strange, unsettling calm. The figure, their form outlined in a soft green glow, turned their attention back to the monstrous entity. "Anyways, what kind of mart has more disaster misfortunes than people?" they asked, their voice laced with a hint of amusement. The monstrous entity, its maw filled with razor-sharp teeth, roared in response. The figure, their form now surrounded by a swirling vortex of green energy, faced the monstrous entity. "Well, then," they began, their voice trailing off as they prepared to unleash their power. The green energy around them coalesced into a serpentine form, its scales shimmering with an otherworldly light. "Should I work out a bit for the first time in a while?" The prelude to a battle that would shake the very foundations of the mart.